All right, guys, we're going to talk about elements of the complete sentence. It's super basic, I understand, but you need to know this part before we kind of build on this later on. So here it has up at the top a lot of the language that we'll use when we're talking about sentence structure. An independent clause, which is here, contains a subject, a verb, and a complete thought. It is a sentence. So when you have a sentence that can stand alone by itself, it has a subject, a verb, and a complete thought. So as I'm highlighting through here, go ahead and highlight on your packet so that you can remember for next time. There's an example here. Steve excels in the classroom. Here we have our subject, Steve. What is he doing? That's the verb. He excels. And then complete thought, in the classroom where he's at. So the subject of a sentence is the person, place, thing, or idea that is doing or being something. Be careful with this because a subject typically is a noun, but there's typically more than one noun in a sentence. You have to look at the noun that's actually doing the action. So here we have Joe purchased a new car. He's the one doing the purchasing. Notice the car is also a noun, but that's not our subject because the car is not purchasing. Joe is the one doing the action. A subject may not always be one word either. Sometimes it can be an entire phrase. In this case, we call it a gerund phrase, and it acts as a subject. So here we have being on time for work is important. If you want to write above here, if you can replace the phrase being on time with it, like it is important, then you know it's a subject. And then same thing here, doing things for others generates happiness. It generates happiness, so we know that that is a subject. That's a gerund phrase. So once we have the subjects down, you'll need to recognize your verbs. Verbs, I think, are a little bit harder because there's so many different types of verbs, but let's start with the action verbs. So we have show it. A verb is a word that shows an action, which we all learned in middle and elementary school. But the state of being verb is the one that's harder for us in high school, and those are most of the verbs that we use in our writing. So here we have Joe purchased the car. What is he doing? He purchased. Really easy, nice. However, you're going to notice that most of your writing, you use the state of being verbs. The car is red. Red is what the car, that's part of its being. It's not changing. It just always is. So we use is red. If you look down here at the bottom, they show all of those different types of verbs. So linking verbs are verbs that indicate a state of being, and these are ones that we use quite a bit. Am, is, are, was, were, be, been, seem, look, appear, taste. Joe seems tired. The window is open. All of those are verbs because they indicate the state of being. Over here we have helping verbs. Helping verbs are verbs that work with a main verb to create a verb phrase. And you're going to see in your writing that you have a lot of verb phrases. There's an example here that shows you Gary should have gone to the party. Gone is your main verb. It's the action. But should have are also parts of helping verbs. So these words are really important. Am, be, have, do, can, may, will. All of those type of verbs are important. So if a group of words lacks a subject, a verb, or a complete thought, that means it's not a complete sentence. So it is a sentence fragment. A sentence fragment is a group of words that's not a complete sentence. Sometimes writers will intentionally use fragments in a piece of literature. However, in most formal compositions, we want to avoid unintended sentence fragments. If you are writing a narrative and you want to use a sentence fragment for effect, you may. But if you're writing a formal paper, no matter what class it is, you really want to avoid sentence fragments. Also, I tell students, depending on your grammar usage, if you don't know the rules and you're doing unintentional sentence fragments and then you try to use one intentionally, it's not going to work because I can't tell what's intentional and what's not. If you have complete control over your grammatical language, you may be able to use one stylistically and get away with it. We'll talk more about this in class. So there's some examples here. The quarterback near the 10-yard line. I have a subject. He's near the 10-yard line, but what's he doing? I have no action. I have no verb. That's a fragment. Then I have shifted into lower gear. I see this a lot in my narrative writing for my students. They use this description because it's like effect and it has kind of the drama to it, but it's a fragment. Who shifted into lower gear? We have no subject. You have to have a person here. Or because I really enjoy football. We'll talk about starting a sentence with because a bit later. But it's not a complete thought because of this one word, because. So all of those are fragments. Let's look down here. Label the subjects and verb phrases in the following examples, then determine whether or not each word group is a sentence or a fragment. So we have Joe plays the piano. Joe is our subject. Plays is our verb. So yes, it's a sentence. I don't know why mine's not working. There it is. Then we have the waitress had cleaned off the table. Waitress is our subject. Had cleaned off. Notice this is the helping. The had is a helping verb. Cleaned is your main verb. Cleaned off. So yes, that's a complete sentence. Two stuffed animals on the bed. I have a subject, two stuffed animals. Animals. What are they doing on the bed? They have to be doing something. The animals sit on the bed, are on the bed, either one, but because I'm missing a verb, would be a fragment. Seeking the truth is the job of a good reporter. Okay, this one's kind of tricky. It's one of those gerund phrases. Seeking the truth has that ing. That I can replace with it. It is the job of a good reporter. So that is a gerund phrase. Subject is my verb. So yes, that's a complete sentence. Then I have while the waitress had cleaned off the table. Well, what happened when the waitress cleaned off the table? It's not a complete thought because of this one word while. Even though it has a subject and a verb, it's not a complete thought. So that would also be a fragment. Okay, I want you to go through, and each time you'll have this little box here where you're going to fill out the information. All of this information here you're going to find up in the notes that we just went over. So it's going to ask you what the blank of a sentence is person, place, thing, or idea that is doing or being something. It has all those bold words in the front. It has all the information that we just talked about there. And then it's going to give you some directions of some stuff that we just did together. So underline the subject and verb or verb phrases, and then tell us if it's a sentence or if it's a fragment. So you'll do there. And then here, which I think is the most important part, you know, it's good to be able to do grammar packets, but it's most important that you're able to write. They're going to ask you to write a specific type of sentence. So I want you to really follow what they're asking you to do here. So a two-word sentence, subject, verb, anger flared. So you're going to want to write, and I know it's difficult, but a two-word sentence is really important, and we'll talk more about why it is important later on when we're doing different types of writing. Then they'll ask you down here for the best use of English grammar conventions. And do watch out these ones, they like to get you with the homonyms, words like whether and weather. So watch out for those. Okay, so go ahead and work on those, and then as you're done and finishing, you can always check the key and see how you did.